Necrons. The immortal robotic race that bring gods to heal. The soulless ones from the time of the war in heaven. The really sleepy guys. This faction in the 40k universe is looked at as a strong contender for the most powerful race among the other factions. They are essentially immortal and can rebuild themselves when damaged. Even time and space are trivial concepts to them. But they are beings that still hold a connection with their past lives as the flesh and blood Necron tier. Before they became the Necrons, they were known as the Necron tier in the era of what they now call the Time of Flesh. During this time, they had to deal with their horrible mortality as a curse-stricken race that would die early on from cancerous growths. But they were still able to maintain a civilization and a society that was able to function. It was a rigid class system under the control of a triumvirate of rulers known as the Triarch. Under the command of the Silent King, the head of the Triarch, the Necron tier were led into the furnaces of biotransference and put into their new living metal bodies to be unwittingly used as tools by the Katon, the treacherous star gods. After a galaxy-spanning war and a rebellion against their cosmic enslavers, the newly dubbed Necrons underwent the Great Sleep to await the time where they could revive their empire as it was in its glorious past. As millions of years went by, the Necrons slowly started to reawake. One of the things that has managed to carry over from their previous lives are the laws that were established in their time as living beings. However, given the obvious change of their biology, they have adapted their laws to better suit their current state. A social and political hierarchy was established that placed each Necron and affiliated party in their respective roles. Such a hierarchy is not based on power, but social standing, as you will soon find out with their lowest member.
Release me! Set me free! Let me out!
Katon Shards. The shackled remnants of the Katon, the same star gods that tricked the Necron tier into the fires of biotransference. After the rebellion of the Silent King, the Necrons shattered these gods into shards since they couldn't be outright killed. They were then imprisoned into Tesseract vaults to serve as tools of war. Now, they exist as beings lower than the lowest slave in the Necron hierarchy. In dire times during a Necron campaign, a Katon Shard can be brought forth from the reserves of a dynasty to unleash its might onto a target of great importance. They will be carefully monitored by their Necron masters to make sure that they can't escape after their task is complete. Should they try to escape, a failsafe in their Tesseract prisons will activate to forcibly drag them back into their holdings and leave them there until their next deployment. The destruction a Katon Shard is capable of unleashing is literally limited by its own imagination. They can summon meteors, break beings down into simple atoms, and banish planets to different dimensions. However, despite their insane abilities, Katon Shards are reviled and constantly tortured by their Necron masters. The shards are beings of near limitless energy, and some are even placed into Necron vehicles and fortresses to act as a potent power supply. Shards belonging to the same original Katon are capable of joining back together. If enough of these shards coalesce, then they can turn into a transcendent Katon Shard. This version of a shard is so powerful that it needs an upgraded prison that constantly shields itself from the damage the lesser god puts out, complete with constructs that constantly repair the walls of the cage and siphon the creature's energies so it literally keeps itself trapped. The necessity to keep the Katon Shards in check has made the Necron race into really experienced jailers. Canoptic constructs. The workers of the Necron Empire that perform, construct, maintain, etc., whatever they are assigned to. A vast majority of them are mindless, only being controlled by a relatively simple AI, or autonomous spirit as the Necrons like to refer. The sizes of canoptic constructs are incredibly varied, but they are all capable of combat. From the tiniest nanoscarab that can infiltrate a living organism to the largest canoptic scolopendra which can make a meal out of a mechanicus ship. One of the more fascinating things about the canoptic constructs is that their myriad forms are based on some of the creatures the Necron tier revered when they were still flesh. These creatures were also brought with them into the fires of biotransference to become the templates from which they could be mass-produced. However, certain Necron tier of the upper class went so far as to bring their own beloved pets with them into the flames, and now they live on together as personal constructs. These constructs are noted as acting more animalistic compared to their more common counterparts. The canoptic constructs play a vital role in the base maintenance and upkeep of the Necron Empire, and their work is acknowledged, but they are still basically beasts of burden and pets at the end of the day.
We're all crazy.
Outcasts. Necrons assigned as auxiliary forces that can be reasoned with to secure their assistance. They are seen as unfit to be around, but their skills in combat can be invaluable. Plus, since they are seen as outside a dynasty, they are more disposable than regular Necrons. Being an outcast is a sad and frightening existence in the eyes of the more sentient Necrons, since their idiosyncrasies were brought about by happenstance. This place in the hierarchy usually involves two groups, the Flayed Ones and the Destroyers. Both are reviled by those above them, and both have suffered from a fault in their programming brought about by viruses or curses. The Flayed Ones are afflicted by the Flayer curse, causing them to desire the consumption of flesh despite being mechanical. The Destroyers suffer from a degradation of self that creates an unstoppable urge to destroy any life they come across. Such problems usually occur due to errors a Necron suffers from while under the Great Sleep. Outcasts are notably different looking compared to other Necrons because they willingly force their necrodermis into different shapes to maximize their killing potential. Flayed Ones forgo all ranged weapons so that their meat won't disintegrate, and Destroyers outfit themselves with more limbs to hold more ranged weapons, sometimes grafting their weapons onto their bodies so that they are inseparable. Destroyers also, noticeably, will get rid of their regular two legs of their Necron bodies and replace them with tripods or gravlifts so as to be faster and deadlier. A higher-ranking Necron, always within the royal court, can hire these outcasts with promises of destruction and carnage. The outcasts are so single-minded that this can be all the assurance that they need. The only problems are getting them to stop once their task is done, and making sure that regular Necrons keep their distance from them to prevent the spread of their illnesses.
I'm only talking because my glorious master allowed it.
Legions. The rank-and-file troops of Necron dynasties. Those of the commoner class of Necron tier that had their minds transferred into basic Necron bodies that hold little to no sentience. They form the majority in a Necron phalanx and are charged with the wave tactics common in Necron strategies. Legions come in 3 different unit types. The most basic are the warriors, the plain Necrons in the simplest bodies. These were once the lower citizenry of the Necron tier. The more advanced ones are known as immortals, given stronger bodies and better weaponry. These were once the favored servants of the Necron tier nobility. And finally, you have the sneaky and incredibly deadly Death Marks. These troops were once the snipers and assassins of the Necron tier nobility, a dishonorable trade, but one that is still necessary. Biotransference has increased their abilities immensely, as they can now move in and out of a dimensional pocket to snipe their targets. There is an unmentioned 4th type of legion, known as the Crypto Thralls. These unfortunates are Necrons that are too damaged to retain any higher cognitive function and must be infected by a canoptic parasite to continue serving, their minds screaming while under their Cryptech's command. Many of the Necron upper class view the legions as replaceable, given that they can just be rebuilt should they be destroyed. They are deemed to have no legal rights and are more akin to property. However, a Legion member can be granted sentience should a Necron of sufficient rank and matching dynasty deem it necessary. This is as close to a promotion as they will get. As they were in the time of flesh, these troops will serve their masters without question and will only speak when allowed. Armory. The various engines of war that are available to a Necron dynasty. These are usually monitored and maintained by Cryptechs, who know the intricacies of their technology. Even though these weapons were not once Necron tier, they are still highly prized due to their destructive capabilities and are trophies that can show off the strength of an individual dynasty. Doomsday weapons, aircraft, spacecraft, monoliths, tomb world defenses, and etc. are all highly valued by their respective owners and are seen as a higher priority to keep safe over the legions. What is particularly interesting in this group are the Necron ships. It isn't necessary for pilots to man the controls of these space vessels and fighter craft, but they are hardwired into their seats regardless, as is tradition. Instead, autonomous spirits take the controls and move to the whims of their masters. Some of these spirits are even communicated with by their Cryptech overseers, and the two of them can have conversations. Cryptechs can even channel their own power through a ship to further increase their destructive output. No dynasty can maintain power without a well-stocked armory, and a dynasty's constant desire to not use these weapons unless absolutely necessary shows this.
We may be immortal and all-powerful, but that doesn't mean we can act like animals.
Triarch Praetorians. The powerful judges and enforcers of ancient Necron tier law who still retain that role even after biotransference. This specific tier of Necrons commands an unusual amount of fear and respect from those even socially above it. This is because they also act as agents of the Triarch and of the Silent King. They are around to make sure the Necron dynasties hold true to the actual ruler of their race. A Praetorian once intimidated a Ferarch into referring to itself as her colleague. Triarch Praetorians also serve as the watchers of tomb worlds, still under the influence of the Great Sleep, making sure that they are secure and protected from outsiders. This means that they are the small number of Necrons that have stayed awake for 60 million years as their colleagues slept. But this fact hasn't dulled their combat abilities at all. Their bodies are crafted to an exceptional quality, and they use technologies that even some of those above their status don't possess. Their rods of the Covenant are exceptional Necron-killing weapons, and they have their own personal gravity displacement packs that allow them to hover in midair while acting as shock troops. When they aren't busy with their usual tasks, Praetorians have been known to visit primitive worlds to disguise themselves as gods and preach the values of the Necron tier. This is so that entire cultures and civilizations could be shaped to the Triarch's standards. Triarch Praetorians will sometimes appear during Necron war campaigns to determine if opponents are worthy of honorable combat or not. This can frustrate any Nemesaur should their opponents be deemed worthy, as the more effective options for war will be taken off the metaphorical table. Another notable thing about the Praetorians is that they are completely sentient and are very capable of intelligent conversation and thought. Not even the highest of the Necron classes can forcefully shut them down, since they aren't worthy of their command protocols. They know who the real bigwig is, and they act on that sometimes. Now, we move on to the royal court of a Necron dynasty. This contains all the top officials that control and maintain a dynasty's power in their section of the galaxy. The size of a royal court reflects the overall strength of a dynasty and its status among the overall Necron race. Think of it like the royal court of a medieval kingdom or empire, since many roles reflect what you find when you compare them together.
This Vargard shall stop all enemies. Now if only I could convince my overlord that he doesn't need food tasters.
Lichard. The royal bodyguards of the Necron lords and overlords that stand with tall, stronger necrodermis bodies and are programmed to be eternally loyal to their masters. They will remain silent and unquestioning when commanded, but certain lords and overlords allow them the relative luxury of speech should they be favored enough. An especially favored Lichard will even be granted command over its own squadron of units. In the time of Flesh, these were once the bodyguards of royalty in Necron tier dynasties. Now, they fulfill that role to an even higher degree. In a battle, these units act as the center in a ground engagement. They will seek out enemy commanders to defeat them as representatives of their lords. Lichards have retained most of their original personalities and, as a result, can be used to act as an emissary for their masters if the danger appears to be too great for them. They will always be ready to sacrifice themselves should their masters command them. Despite the usual sluggishness of the regular Necron legions, Lichards will act independently should the situation call for it. These bodyguards are armed with some of the best close-ranged weaponry available to Necron fighters, capable of cutting through the toughest armor while also possessing shields that can reflect explosive force back onto the attacker. Unwavering in death and unerring in battle, these sometimes silent elite fighters are not to be underestimated.
To battle we go, and to our destiny I lead.
Royal Wardens, the sub-commanders of the Necron dynasties. These valuable Necrons will be given command over their own war phalanxes and given directives by their superiors on how to wage a campaign. Usually under an Overlord, a Royal Warden will fight a battle according to their orders. But they do still retain the independence of thought to adapt their strategies in hectic wars. Despite this freedom of thought, their protocols still render them unquestionably loyal to their masters. Even though they are lower in status than an Overlord, a Royal Warden will still be called upon to give their pieces of advice before an enemy engagement.
It is such foolishness to believe anyone else has mastered science. You can't even imagine it, primitives. The feeling of the material forces at your command.
Cryptechs, the masters of Necron technology and the practitioners of advanced Necron scientific techniques. They know how Necron machinery works and are able to wield the raw forces of the material universe to do their bidding. The mere forces of the physical universe are all they need to perform their feats of science, unlike psychers who channel the power of the warp. Cryptechs are unique in that they are not necessarily bound to the rule of a dynasty. They study in conclaves that pertain to certain practices in tech sorcery, and then they offer their services to overlords that are willing to hire them. Quid pro quo is a necessary bargaining tactic between a cryptech and their patron. In some examples, they could be offered sanctuary in exchange for their knowledge, or components for tech relics that can be engineered into working machines if the cryptech helps the dynasty deal with an impending battle. In the workings of the hierarchy in royal court, a cryptech works like a court magician. They can also function as Necron physicians who research and try to prevent the spread of tech viruses that can cripple a dynasty. The secrets of cryptech sorcery are closely held within their conclaves and are not openly shared with any outsiders. Most nobles don't really want to put in the effort to learn how their technology works, and instead just leave everything related to that to their tech sorcerers. This can lead to some moments where an overlord is at the bargaining mercy of a cryptech who is the only one that can figure out how to fix a ship or a certain component in times of emergency. Cryptechs who study sufficiently enough in certain practices earn essence tomes, which are ornamental tiles that are worn in a chain to signify mastery in the tech sorcery arts. These tiles are forged from raw universal materials that pertain to a specific area of study. For example, a chronomancer's essence tomes are forged from pure time. A wise overlord will work with their cryptechs to get an advantage over any rival dynasties, but they shouldn't allow these tech sorcerers to hold all the power in the partnership.
Invade my planet if you dare. It is already a tomb. What bodies fill it are up to you.
Lords, the nobles of the royal court that govern a single tomb world of a dynasty. These are the upper class of the Necron race who have maintained complete sentience after biotransference. Despite their status, they will still take to the battlefield as direct combatants, supporting their troops, i.e. property. Even though the Necron tier have evolved into a race of ageless, powerful machines, they are still subject to politics and the inner workings involved with it. Political backstabbings can still take place with the goal of placing themselves in better positions of power. Maybe they do not like the tomb world they were assigned to monitor, and they could gain the governorship of a better one. Dynastic feuds that have lasted literally millions of years can still be fought over. A lord may have been a noble with an office of high authority when they were still flesh, but many stations are seen to be obsolete in the current age. You don't really need a master of grain when your entire race doesn't need to eat anymore. The uncertainties of awakening from the great sleep can cause power vacuums that a lord will be only too happy to fill. A Necron tier noble once had subjects to command and lands to lord over. Now they can do both to the highest degree imaginable, controlling subjects that cannot disobey them, and ruling over a planet filled to the core with everything a lord needs to support their title. Some lords are known to control specialized war cells and become harbingers that have specific tasks. A harbinger of awakening will go to dormant tomb worlds to start the processes of reviving its long-sleeping inhabitants. A harbinger of night leads a raid force after shrouding a targeted world in darkness. Finally, the harbinger of the storm summons massive lightning storms that disrupt enemy communications and call down electric fury. The upper crust of society hasn't really lost much with biotransference, whether that be power or political intrigue.
Please follow me when this presentation ends, so that I may show you my newest display.
Overlords. The even nobler nobles that watch over multiple tomb worlds and command nearly the entire arsenal of their dynasty. Overlords are granted prime Necron bodies that allow them to be peerless generals and tacticians while also granting them total sentience. Like it is with the Necron hierarchy, tomb worlds are also placed in an order of importance. There are crown worlds, core worlds, and fringe worlds, and the overlords get the best properties. It is an overlord's responsibility to ensure the safety of the crown worlds and core worlds, especially, since they are tombs which house a majority of a dynasty's citizens and advanced technologies. Overlords are some of the Necrons who set objectives for their dynasty's expansions of power, usually moving everyone along towards an overarching goal. An overlord holds true to the regal decorum of the ancient Necron tier, for they are supposed to embody those ideals. But they are known to think outside the box when it comes to sacrificing the old codes for the sake of practicality. In a different era with different bodies, the Necrons must adapt to survive in this cruel galaxy. A sentient Necron's greatest enemy is boredom, and overlords usually find ways to combat it that often give them chastising looks from their fellow androids. In a way, overlords are the push that keeps their dynasties from falling into total stagnation.
My dynasty shall span as far as my storm spreads. Do you hear me, Silent King?
Pharaons. The absolute ruler of a dynasty. They are overlords who have proven their strength and skill in leading, and have been moved up to this rank by the consensus of their colleagues. Only the kings and queens in Necron tier society would reawaken as pharaons and pharaohs, with their heirs as some of the overlords. But since Necrons can't keep their rule over a dynasty within the family line anymore, many titles have been claimed by overlords that just decided to usurp their thrones. Nothing in the dynasty's arsenal is off limits to them. A pharaon will rule their kingdom from the crown world and issue commands to his lessers that they won't dare disobey. It is rare that they personally take to a battlefield, but all hope should be abandoned if they do. They will have their immortal legions, their god-killing superweapons, and powerful cryptechs, lords, and overlords at their disposal. As the dynastic ruler, a pharaon can assign promotions to worthy Necrons, or punishments to dissidents he once removed from his plans. However, with all of this power comes the responsibility of ensuring their dynasty's continued existence. The Sword of Damocles does not do the role justice, since Necrons cannot increase their numbers, and a destroyed tomb world could mean a pharaon's reign gets cut in half. A tech virus outbreak could cripple their armory. A conspiring group within the royal court could dethrone them. A pharaon has so much power, and many scenarios will make sure that they inevitably lose it. As an immortal, they just get to watch the process play out in slow motion.
Oh look, a fly on the celestial orrery. Better get rid of that.
Triarch, the supreme ruler of the entire Necron race. The Triarch is named as such because it is headed by 3 pharaons, the leader being dubbed the Silent King. He was called as such because the two other pharaohs would address his subjects through their voices. However, that was in the Necron tier times. Now, the last Silent King, Shazarek, maintains the Triarch in a way where he has absolute authority. The two pharaohs at his side, Hapthatra the Radiant and Mesophet the Shadowed Hand, are merely figureheads added onto his Katon-powered dais of dominion that speak with his voice and never overrule him. Shazarek now does his tasks as he did before the Great Sleep, making sure the Necron race doesn't destroy itself while also trying to cultivate unity into it. His biggest goal, currently, is the destruction of the Tyranid swarms that threaten to consume the entire galaxy. The influence of the Triarch can be seen on every Necron, as they all bear the Ankh of the Triarch on their necrodermis. This is a way to keep everyone connected to their ancient heritage. The Triarchy is supported completely by the Triarch Praetorians, who act as agents and spies to make sure that every Necron dynasty still acknowledges the Silent King as its absolute ruler. Some dynasties do not respect his authority, but they have enough firepower to challenge Shazarek, so there isn't much he can do about that at the moment. But some of the lesser dissidents reportedly disappeared from the eyes of their royal courts. When the Silent King was given over to biotransference, he received a flawless Necron body that is incapable of degradation, and he is able to recall every memory from his previous life. He also had the command protocols for every Necron that he used to mount his rebellion against the Katon and shatter them before enacting the Great Sleep. He destroyed those command protocols out of guilt before leaving the galaxy on a self-imposed 60-million-year exile. Now, he has returned, and wants to make sure that the Tyranids and the follies of the lesser races do not leave him without a kingdom to rule. This has been my video on the Necron hierarchy. If you enjoyed listening to it, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Please look forward to my next video where I'll be covering the Eldari Paths.